Well, hey Kingsgate, it's great to bring this final session in our amazing series on the book of Daniel. And today I'm in Rome, and particularly overlooking ancient Rome. And this is a great location from which to share this message on Daniel 12, because Daniel, as we've seen through this series, he not only has the small lens on to show the individual stories of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, individuals making their stand in Babylon, but he also has the wide-angle lens on, and there are visions in Daniel that capture world empires. Do you remember that one in Daniel 2? I think this is my favourite, where Daniel sees a vision of world empires. He sees the Babylonians, then the Persians, then the Greeks, and then the Roman Empire. You know, beneath me is ancient Rome, the Forum, the Colosseum behind that, these centres of world power. Daniel saw it all, and do you remember he saw then a rock, not cut by human hands, striking the bottom of this statue of world power, and the whole thing crumbling. You know, today the Roman Empire is in the history books, but the kingdom of Jesus Christ continues to grow all over the world. And Daniel 12, the final vision in Daniel, captures this sense of the hope of Jesus Christ reaching the world and ultimately reaching into eternity. So in this message I'm going to bring you, I want to show you some of these sites and connect them with the Daniel story and help us understand these incredible visions. They are apocalyptic. They can seem quite unusual to us. They have visions and symbols and numbers that we don't fully understand even to this day. But don't let that put you off. At the heart of it is a message of hope in the face of great challenge. You know, the early Christians here in Rome faced terrible persecution. We're going to think about that. But they also faced it with the hope of resurrection, and that meant they made a difference and shared the good news of Jesus here and to the ends of the earth. Well, today, based on Daniel 12, I've got one headline really: a clearer vision of our future brings a greater value to the present. A clearer vision of our eternal future means we have greater value here in this present moment. And we're going to unpack this with three simple headings. Be optimistic, the best is yet to come. Be realistic, trouble will follow. And be evangelistic, we have a hope that we need to share. So be optimistic is the first point I want to make, and it picks up particularly from Daniel chapter 12 and verse 2. You know, in the Old Testament, up until this point, Daniel may have been one of the very last books penned and put into the Old Testament section, the Hebrew Scriptures. Up until this point, actually, the clarity of what comes beyond this life is not always there. You know, the earlier Scriptures speak about Sheol, this place where, well, it's almost like the dead are waiting to find out what happens next. There are glimpses in some of the Psalms that some of our hope of eternal life and pleasures at God's right hand, but it's pretty unclear about exactly what our final hope is. But Daniel 12 brings the clearest vision and says, be optimistic, the best is yet to come. Listen to Daniel 12 and verse 2. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life and some to shame and contempt. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above. Notice this. For the first time in the Old Testament, there is an absolutely clear declaration of resurrection hope. Those who sleep in the dust. You know, dust is an important symbol in the Bible of the frailty of human life apart from God. From dust you came, Genesis 3 says, and to dust you shall return. We arose from the dust as Adam was created and formed out of the dust of the ground, and then when we turn away from God, we return to the dust, we decay in death. But here we're being told, instead of thinking that just the end of life is just dust, you know, as some atheist philosophers would say, you know, when I die, Bertrand Russell, a famous 20th century atheist philosopher, said, when I die, I rot from dust to dust. And Daniel says, no, be optimistic. The best is yet to come. It's not dust that will finish our story, but glory in eternal hope. The resurrection then of Jesus Christ has secured in history the hope that Daniel foresaw even before the Romans were here: we shall rise. Now this, of course, is a very different philosophy to the world around us. The world around us philosophy is YOLO, really, isn't it? You only live once. YOLO, you only live once. So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us like the Romans, just trying to have as much entertainment, as much pleasure, as much power and prestige as possible, because you've got to get everything in this life, because that's all you've got. No, no, no. Daniel says, be optimistic. The best is yet to come. Don't live with such small horizons that think you only live once. No. The Bible's philosophy is B2B. The best is yet to come, right? Or B2C, the best is yet to come. The best hope lies not in this life. You don't need to try and get it all here and now. Don't suffer from FOMO, the fear of missing out, because YOLO, you only live once. No. Live a bigger, bolder vision than that. Live from Daniel 12. We are dust in this life, but the dust will rise into glory in the world to come. We won't fundamentally, if you put your faith in Jesus Christ, you cannot miss out on the ultimate hope that he brings. So whatever challenges you're facing right now, even if physically you are weak and infirm and frail, I want to encourage you, don't look back in nostalgia as if your best days lie behind you. Look forwards in hope. Your best days lie ahead of you. We shall shine like the sun in all of its glory. We shall be like those that Daniel speaks of in Daniel 12, who shine in the sky in the glory of God. Now, I say that doesn't mean we're going to float around on clouds. The rest of the scriptures unpack the hope that we have, which is resurrection means new creation. We'll get a physical world. The word glory in the Hebrew Bible is chabod, which means weighty or solid. You know, the world to come is not less real than this stone, than this forum. It's more real than the Roman Empire. It's not going to fade away. It's going to endure forever. C.S. Lewis captures this in The Great Divorce, The Weight of Glory. He picks up on this idea that one of us in this life, shadowy creatures, we couldn't even pluck a daisy in the world to come. It's so much more solid and real than we are. So lift your eyes from what is around you to what is to come. Do not succumb to a world that has no ultimate eternal hope, and live as if all that life is about is trying to get as much pleasure and prestige as possible, and then that's it. That'll just wrap you up in knots and leave you anxious and fearing missing out. Live a bolder life from Daniel 12. Be optimistic. The best is yet to come. But secondly, be realistic. Daniel goes on to say, be optimistic, the best is yet to come, but then he says, be realistic. Tough times do lie ahead. Daniel 12 has a beautiful symmetry and balance to it. It is optimistic, the best is yet to come, but it's also realistic. In the meantime, those who follow God are going to face real challenges, real persecution. In Daniel 12, he speaks in verse 1 of Michael, the great archangel Michael, coming to God's people, the great prince, he calls him here, who has charge of your people. And he says, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never been since there was a nation, until that time when God's people will be delivered. It's very realistic, isn't it? There will be a time of trouble coming in the future before our ultimate hope that is worse than has ever been experienced before. What is this referring to? Well, we don't exactly know. So many Old Testament prophecies have a near fulfillment and a far fulfillment. They speak to a near horizon, something that's already happened, and they speak to a far horizon, something that's still happening. And this one, if the first point, be optimistic, is about resurrection, the second point, be realistic, is about persecution. That has already happened after Daniel was written. And in fact, in Daniel 12, he refers later on, down in verse 11, he refers to the abomination that makes desolation. This was fulfilled through an event that happened between the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament, the intertestamental period. There was a Greek ruler called Antiochus Epiphanes, or Antiochus IV. He attacked Jerusalem. He sacked the temple of God's people. Now think about this, if you're a Jewish person. He sacrificed a pig on the altar in the temple and set up a statue to the god Zeus. I mean, if you're a Jew, that's the most horrendous experience. Many of them were persecuted and killed in that oppression. So on the one hand, Daniel refers to a tough time that's already happened. But as often is the case, these apocalyptic visions have a near fulfillment. That one's already happened, but it also has a far fulfillment. It's still happening. God's people are still terribly persecuted in different parts of the world. You know, every morning over breakfast, our family look at a resource from Open Doors, which I really recommend, and it outlines the 50 most dangerous countries in the world to be a Christian today. And what's interesting is they give it a score. They give every country a score out of 100 of how dangerous it is. Right at the top, North Korea, then Afghanistan, and all the way down through. And what's interesting is the scores since they last measured them, almost every one of them has gone up. You know, this is a time when on the one hand the good news is spreading, be optimistic, but it's also a time when Christians are being persecuted. Be realistic. It's not easy to follow Jesus Christ. One of the reasons why we like to read this with our children in the morning and pray. This morning, you know, we were praying for another country in Africa that's really a tough place to be a Christian. The other day we prayed for Nigeria, one of the scores that's really gone up recently. Christians in such a challenging environment where Islamic fundamentalists are a real threat to their lives. You know, this is a continual outworking of Daniel 12. It's not easy to follow Jesus Christ. He never promised it would be. He's the leader who died on a cross. So the Saviour gives us the example and the footsteps to follow in. It's not going to be easy. Be realistic. As well as the hope of a resurrection, we face the real reality of persecution. Now you might think, as the scores are going up in all other parts of the world, but we're not facing any of that here in the West. Well, I don't know. I don't know what's on the horizon for the West. It's not easy to be a Christian in your workplace, in our community. Some people, their jobs are under threat if they stand for what we really believe in through the Bible. Persecution may be a bit close around the corner than we think. That's actually why we like to do this with our children in the morning. We like to just remind us as a family, hey, brothers and sisters all around the world are suffering for Christ. It was never meant to be easy. So be realistic. I want to prepare my children for the fact that sometimes following Christ will be tough. But that doesn't mean it's the wrong thing to do. Be realistic. Tough times lie ahead. Daniel 12 gives us an honest view of that. A couple of things I like to do as a way of responding to that myself. One is every night, before I get into bed, I just kneel by my bedside and I put on the armour of God. As a reminder, even as I sleep, I need to be clothed in the armour of God, because it's not easy to be a Christian, and there's a real enemy, a spiritual enemy. There's a material enemy, the world around us, the culture that can be hostile, but there's a spiritual enemy as well. Our fight is not against flesh and blood, Paul says, but there are real spiritual powers. So put on the armour of God. You know, you're a soldier, not a civilian if you're a Christian. This isn't a cruise liner, this is a battleship that you've joined. So put on the armour of God, pray and fast and be diligent, because we are facing challenging times and we need to be ready to respond with the good news of Jesus Christ. Put on the armour of God then, get ready. Be prepared. And the other thing I like to do is just to fast regularly. I know this is a Kingsgate value. Fast regularly. Pray, because these are challenging times and we need to be those who are immersed in Scripture, immersed in prayer, and ready for the real fight that lies ahead. Be optimistic. The best is yet to come. But be realistic. You know, tough times do lie ahead. Prepare ourselves and our children for that. But finally, and most importantly, be evangelistic. Be optimistic, the best is yet to come. Be realistic, tough times lie ahead, but be evangelistic, it's time to go. In verse 9 and verse 12, verse 13, right at the very end, there's this interesting phrase, but you, Daniel, go your way. In other words, we've had incredible visions, apocalyptic visions, things we don't understand. There's a section here where numbers are mentioned. There'll be 1,290 days before this great trouble comes, and then 1,335 days. And you ask me, well, what are these days referring to? And I say, actually, I don't know. You know, I've studied the Bible for years, and this is one verse. I don't know what that means. There's mystery in the Bible. Maybe in the future we'll understand what those numbers meant. I don't think right now we know. There's mystery in the Bible, but what we're left with in Daniel is not to sit around speculating about the mysteries. We're left with a call for urgency. Be evangelistic. What does the angel say to Daniel? Go your way. Go. Notice the verb. It's urgent. There's a call to action now. Go your way, Daniel. Don't sit around speculating and getting caught up in strange theories and conspiracies and fearful catastrophizing. No. Get on the front foot and go your way. Be evangelistic. Now, what might that mean for us? Well, as seasonal moments like Christmas approach, there's an opportunity to invite people to hear the good news of Jesus. There's a call in our workplaces and communities to be praying for those who don't know Christ and sharing in word and deed the good news that we have found in Him. Be evangelistic. Go your way is a call, and I love this call because it's really sort of saying, you know, it's saying, don't look at what other people are doing. Don't get caught looking around your shoulder, scrolling through social media all the time and comparing other people's lives and yours. No, go your way. There's a call on your life. Get focused now. He who puts his hand to the plough mustn't look back, mustn't look around. They won't plough a straight furrow. No. Get focused. God, what are you calling me to do? And the circumstances that I'm in might not seem ideal, but don't be one of those people who thinks, well, if I got a different job, then I could witness for Christ. If I had a different partner, if I had a different family, lived in a different house, then I'd be... No. Now. Go your way now. Don't procrastinate. Be evangelistic. Earlier on in Daniel 12, he refers to, down in verse 1, he refers to those who will be delivered and speaks of everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. The book is a metaphor. It's not that God literally needs books to jog his memory about what he's decided. It's a metaphor, but it's a metaphor that says there are real people and real names at stake here. Is your name in the book? Have you registered? Have you booked in to the hope that we have in Jesus Christ? I want to be evangelistic right now with you. Have you put your faith in Jesus Christ? You know, sometimes, like in Rome, I turn up to a hotel and someone else has made the booking for us. And, you know, it's a funny, anxious moment where you turn up at the reception and you think, I wonder if they've got my name on their books. And fortunately they did, and I've got a place to stay, and they were prepared and they were expecting me. And it's almost like Daniel is saying, firstly, have you got your name in God's book? Have you put your faith in Jesus Christ? Do you know that beyond this life, resurrection hope is yours? Put your faith in Jesus. There is good news, but you have to believe in the one who is the source of that good news. Christianity is not a philosophy or a moral code. It is a person, Jesus Christ. I urge you today, book yourself in by putting your faith in Jesus Christ. And then, having done that, be evangelistic. Help other people make their reservation with the good news of Christ. I love this little verse, and with this I finish, but I love this little verse. Daniel says, speaking about the end times, the hope of eternity, he says in verse 3, those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky. And then he switches the metaphor. And those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. I love that idea that we'll shine like the sun, that's our hope. But when we help others to righteousness, when we bring others to faith in Jesus, we'll not only shine like the sun, but we'll be arrayed with stars of others who've made it to glory because we were evangelistic, we were witnesses of Jesus Christ. Can I ask you, not only have you made your reservation, but who else are you bringing with you? Who are you bringing with you to hear about Jesus? This Christmas, this life that we have to live is an opportunity not just to secure our hope, but to bring others into it as well. Be optimistic. The best is yet to come. Be realistic. Tough times lie ahead, and be evangelistic. It's time to go. When I bring all of this together into one message, I think, what does this look like in person? I think of my Auntie Edna. She lived in Bath, a city really affected by the Roman empires, the Roman baths. And there she was a lady who faced life with a hope of eternity. I'll never forget, whenever we visited her, she's now died and gone to be with the Lord, but she always used to have this saying, only one life, 'twill soon be past. What's done for Jesus will last. And as a kid, that stuck with me. Even though I didn't always believe it, to be honest, growing up, it still got me, now. There's one life. Go your way, Daniel, because you've got one life. Go your way, you've got one opportunity. What we do for Jesus Christ is what will echo into eternity, bringing others to glory. Well, my Auntie Edna, she was evangelistic. She was optimistic, she had the hope of resurrection, and that made her evangelistic. She lived with eternity in sight, and so she used to walk every Sunday. She'd walk miles from one Sunday school service to another. And hundreds of children grew up knowing the Bible because my Auntie Edna invested in them. She used to, during the week, knit clothes. I was not always a fan of the jumpers, if I'm very honest, that Auntie Edna knitted for me. They didn't always fit, and I didn't always want to wear them, but she was incredibly generous because she knitted jumpers, particularly in clothes for those in relief aid and in parts of the world where there were disasters. And she just fed into the good contributions that we can make, word and deed. She was evangelistic. And then one day, she was in her 80s, she was sitting at home, and on her own, two thugs broke into her home, broad daylight, and at knife point, they robbed her of her money, held her up at knife point, and then left with her savings. And this was her response, right? Tough times will come. Be optimistic, but be realistic. She phoned the police, and then the next call she made was to my mother. And my mother told me the conversation. She said, Auntie Edna phoned, and she said, explain what had happened. And then she said, this is really difficult for me now, she said, because I already had a long prayer list, and now I've got 2 more people to add to it. That was her response to being held up at knife point, is these young men who've just robbed me, they need to know Jesus Christ. She prayed for them. And when she died, at her funeral, I spoke to someone who was there from a young offenders prison, and they told me that one of those boys, who they were both caught and put in prison, one of them had come on an Alpha course and given his life to Jesus Christ. And I like to think of Auntie Edna shining in the stars of glory, and one day she'll be joined by that young man who robbed her at knife point because she refused to be overcome by evil, but she overcame evil with good. She was evangelistic. We've got one life. It will soon be past. It's what we've done for Jesus that will last. So I urge you, in the light of eternity, the Roman Empire's gone, but the kingdom of Jesus Christ will reign forever. Invest yourself in this kingdom and put your hope in Jesus Christ. Be optimistic, the best is yet to come. Be realistic, tough times lie ahead, and be evangelistic. It's time to go. God bless you.